Hi guys, welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. And today I'm going to be reviewing Boosh, Stoner by John Williams, or Mr. Stoner, as he is known by some twerp of a character later. So, Stoner is about an English professor at the University of Missouri from the 1920s to the 1950s. And this is a book I never would have picked up. I never would have picked this book up on its own. And this is one of the really good things about BookTube and having a community and knowing people and knowing their tastes and knowing what people are going to like and being able to kind of translate people's own specific kind of review language. Because when Jimmy was talking about this, my good friend Jimmy Nuts over at the Fantasy Network, he told me specifically that I would like this book. And I had never heard of John Williams. When he said John Williams, I thought it was obviously the composer. And I don't read a ton of kind of literary fiction. But the thing that sold me is that it was free on Audible, and so I went ahead and I said, you know what, Jimmy, I'll download it and I'll listen to it. It wasn't very long, and I did, and I am very, very glad I did. So without wasting any more time...
Well, excuse me, princess.
This is my review of Stoner. So the first thing that I need to say is that John Williams is an absolutely brilliant writer. I love John Williams' writing style. It may actually be one of my favorite writing styles, ever. And I hate the way literary fiction is written. I don't like it at all. But John Williams has such a plain and simple prose that is also so poetic and musical and beautiful and evocative, but never bogs you down and is never dense. I never had to read a passage more than one time to understand what he was trying to say. He is incredibly gifted. It is such a feat to have prose that I can acknowledge is really, really pretty, but not distracting or a hindrance in any way. And so I am reading Augustus next month by John Williams, and if it has the same kind of prose, John Williams will probably skyrocket to the top of one of my favorite actual technical writers. The second thing I need to say is that the entire tone of the book, and you are told, the book is spoiled from the beginning. From the first paragraphs, the first two paragraphs, it tells you entirely what the book is about. And from those first paragraphs, you are hooked. And I'm going to read you the first two paragraphs so you understand for yourself, right at the beginning, what you're in for. And the opening paragraphs are so melancholy in a way that, I was hooked from those opening passages. William Stoner entered the University of Missouri as a freshman in the year 1910 at the age of 19. 8 years later, during the height of World War I, he received his Doctor of Philosophy degree and accepted an internship at the same university where he taught until his death in 1956. He did not rise above the rank of assistant professor, and few students remembered him with any sharpness after they had taken his courses. When he died, his colleagues made a memorial contribution of a medieval manuscript to the university library. This manuscript may still be found in the rare books collection, bearing the inscription, "Presented to the Library of the University of Missouri in memory of William Stoner, Department of English, by his colleagues." An occasional student who comes upon the name may wonder idly who William Stoner was, but he seldom pursues his curiosity beyond a casual question. Stoner's colleagues, who held him in no particular esteem when he was alive, speak of him rarely now. To the older ones, his name is a reminder of the end that awaits them all, and to the younger ones, it is merely a sound which evokes no sense of the past and no identity with which they can associate themselves or their careers. And that's basically all you need to know about William Stoner. He is a professor. He has no great effect on either his colleagues or the people that he taught. Begins his life as on a farm, and he is smart and does well in school, but is expected to take over the farm until he ends up, they open a new school in Columbia. And guys, it took me about a third of this book to realize it wasn't Columbia, New York. It was on audio, so I must have missed where it was Missouri, or I missed where he wasn't going to New York and coming back to Missouri, and then some context was like, they're not in New York, and so it's Columbia, Missouri, which, just know, it's Columbia, Missouri. And so he goes to the University of Missouri in Columbia, and meets a literature professor there that kind of changed his life by, being super mean to him and telling him he's an idiot and doesn't understand anything. And he realizes he has a passion for literature, and he in a very, very profound scene. Both Joanna and Jimmy were they were more touched by the scene than I was. There were other scenes that got me more. He has to tell his parents that he's not gonna go back to the farm. He's gonna stay on the thing, and it is a great scene. Don't get me wrong. And for me, his job as an English professor is the most interesting part of the novel for me. Stoner clearly loves English, but he has difficulty, as I think many of us do, especially as content creators. We're trying to convey our love of the subject and of what, our love of these books and these things we read. We're trying to convey them to other people, to you guys, and instill that kind of same passion and love for these things in you guys. And it doesn't always work. We have all of this passion and love for what we're doing, but we struggle to get that across in the best way possible that ignites that same kind of passion in other people. I know as a teacher, it definitely hits home with me as Stoner, who loves what he does. He teaches the students who mostly don't care. He teaches literature and they mostly don't care, and it doesn't have a profound effect on them the way it does on him, and I get that. As a teacher, teaching the classics like ancient history and Latin and all this stuff is profound for me, but it is not for most of my students. And so I understand where Stoner is coming from in that particular respect. And so I have said before that this may be my favorite book that I didn't really like. It's kind of like a sibling or your family where you love them, but you don't necessarily like them sometimes. And I don't know if I liked this book, while at the same time, I may have loved this book because of the emotions that John Williams can wring out of me. With his prose and just the real, clear, no-frills portrayal of kind of the human condition. Stoner is looking for love, as all of us are. He marries someone that he has idealized, and that marriage is the worst part of the book. I hate Edith. I hate her so much. And guess what? She hates Stoner. And Stoner is the most passive human being on the planet. And they let their daughter become, the spoils of this particular war, where if Edith can't stick it to Stoner through normal means, he'll get at him through his daughter. And that is, to me, Stoner's greatest sin, that he sits by and lets Edith make this child miserable. And when he has, Stoner, it's your daughter. You're making her miserable too, dude. What are y'all doing? I hate the cost that it takes on their daughter. And so for the first half of this book, I knew it was a good book. I knew I was reading something that was really good, but I didn't particularly enjoy it until we hit about chapter 10, where we finally see what Stoner really cares about, and that is the ideals behind education and the university and literature, where this absolute pest of a graduate student, whom Stoner bends over backwards to help when he didn't have to. This kid he possesses no academic integrity. He is someone who is accustomed to having people either revile him or make exceptions for him because of his disability. And one of Stoner's peers is his graduate advisor, and both Lomax and Walker are disabled, and there's kind of a kinship that develops there, and Lomax just is willing to compromise any principle for this kid who is just taking advantage of the system, doesn't actually know anything. And there is a scene where Charlie Walker has to defend his doctoral thesis, his doctoral dissertation, with Lomax, who is he's the Stoner's peer in the English department, and Stoner and their friend Gordon, who is the dean at the dean of the English department at this point. And the way in which this scene unfolds, it is a scene, guys, it is a scene where they're talking about medieval literature. That is what it's so many highbrow terminology, and it's absolutely academic speak, and yet it was one of the most riveting, upsetting, nausea-inducing scenes I have ever read in any novel. When I finished the book, I went back and reread that scene or re-listened to it. It's brilliant, and from that moment on, I was sold. It hit The exact part that you guys know is corruption and injustice and politics within an academic setting. And do you let something go for the because you know if you don't, it's going to create problems for you by people who are higher up than you? Do you compromise your principles one time just to keep the peace? It was so good. And so that I am sure was the part that Jimmy wanted me to read, and I was sold from then on in. Stoner is not super likable. He makes bad decisions. He is passive. He does things like after I'm like, yes, Stoner, like, attaboy. I'm like, no, Stoner, like, what are you doing, man? He is incredibly fallible, and I don't really like anybody in this book because they're all kind of unpleasant and disgustingly normal. And that's really all I can say. And it's all just ending towards his mediocre, unremembered, or uncelebrated death. And it causes an existential crisis in me, because is that my job? Like, is that my legacy? Is my legacy to freaking teach Latin and ancient history to high schoolers some of whom care, but most of whom don't, and then I'm going to die and no one will remember? And people be like, oh yeah, I remember that guy, okay. And like, everyone's always like, oh well, your students will remember you 20, yeah, okay, like, I get it. But is that what I want to be, like a footnote in other people's memories? That's the effect that I have. So it has caused great internal strife within me. And if you read the introduction, John Williams himself had an interview where he says that most people think that Stoner had this like bad life, but he didn't. Like, Stoner had a job that he believed in, and he was, unlike most of us, doing something that he loved to do. He wanted to do it. That's what he chose to do. And he loved it. He wasn't particularly successful at it by the world standards, but he was doing what he loved up until he died. And so I guess he's right. Stoner does have a better life than a lot of other people. Anyway, nothing happens in this book. So there's really nothing to, there's not anything to spoil. There's not anything, it doesn't matter. The first two paragraphs tell you everything that's going to happen. The introduction, if you read the introduction, spoils every major plot beat. And it doesn't matter, because it is so incredibly profoundly written and resonates as such a realistic portrayal of people doing their best. I cannot recommend this highly enough. If you've never tried John Williams, I absolutely recommend this. I will let you know if I recommend Augustus even more after I read it next month. On the Kingfin approval system, I give this book a superb. Absolutely. It is a superb, sublime experience, especially chapter 10 if you are also an academic. Out of 5 stars, 5 easy stars. It is free on audio, and the narrator's fantastic if you don't feel like, reading a physical copy. Audible has it for free. So guys, that is it for me for today. Have you read Stoner? Do you agree? What was your favorite part of Stoner? What lesson do you draw? Are you in an existential crisis like me? Do you like Edith? Do you feel bad for Edith? Do you feel bad for Grace? Do you also hate Hollis Lomax and Charlie Walker? Anyway, guys, that's it for me for today. As always, information about my Patreon and Discord is down in the description, and I'll see you next time, guys.